Hello, my friends. It's Monday's morning, and it means it's a good time to watch second issue of Weekly Links. The first article is my list is about getting started with Jakarta EE10, and it's one of the most useful specification. It's Jakarta REST. So before talking about this article, because article itself is quite simple, um, it explains how to start using Jakarta REST. I need to tell a little about Jakarta EE at all. So we all know that many years ago, Java EE was quite popular, and unfortunately, it was very verbose and required a lot of attention, a lot of code to be used, so that it lost its popularity one by one. Nevertheless, there are many applications which are built using Java EE, and at some point in time in the past, uh, Oracle decided to decommission Java EE, but unfortunately or fortunately, community said no, you can't do that because we already have a lot of applications which are written using it. So that's Jakarta EE became a new reincarnation of Java EE when it was, let's say, taken by Eclipse Foundation. Nowadays, Jakarta EE tries to build a meaningful set of specifications which are useful for building microservices, and in common it is called microprofile. And Jakarta EE REST is one of specifications inside Jakarta EE which tells what way we can use in order to build a REST-based service. If we compare it with Spring, yes, we definitely have more developers who are familiar with Spring. Nevertheless, we have modern projects like, for example, Quarkus, which is built on top of Jakarta E, which uses Jakarta E REST as a specification for REST services. So if you look into different options and like to know not only Spring, but for example, Micronaut or maybe Quarkus or maybe Heliton, so Jakarta E is something which you should be familiar with. If you're building REST API, it would be nice to test it. And one of the most widely used tools for testing REST API is obviously Postman. But as an engineer, as a developer, as a software engineer, you ordinarily use an IDE from JetBrains, especially in case if you write Java. But obviously, in case if you write Kotlin, for example, or Python, Ruby, Groovy, or almost any programming language, you also can use IDE from JetBrains because it's fantastic. So, why am I talking about it? It's because JetBrains IDEs, all of them have a fantastic feature which is called JetBrains HTTP client, which allows to build declarative web clients or HTTP client for your API. Why it is useful? Because first of all, what you can do, you can describe your API tests as a code. Well, obviously, yes, you can do the same with Postman, but Postman saves your configuration somewhere in the cloud. But in case of JetBrains HTTP client, all the configuration will be saved in the same code base, which is quite useful and convenient because on the one hand in your code base you have your services, on the other hand in your code base you also have a collection of HTTP clients. And what else is interesting in this article is that actually there is a quite convenient tool which is called Open API Generator, which allows to build API clients back based on API definition or based on HTTP client for JetBrains definition. So what does it mean? It means that you're, let's say, for example, taking OpenAPI specification and based on it, using this simple tool and this simple command, you can build Java client back, which is quite convenient. But it seems I'm quite old, and I still remember that many years ago when we had Eclipse IDE, in Eclipse it also was possible to build back different REST clients based on the specification. But nowadays Eclipse is not so popular, but so that uh, let's say building clients from specification in different let's say ID is also a quite good way of building API clients. My third links, it is a talk from Java Developer Days, and it is about JavaFX. You remember when Java 9 was introduced, it also introduced a quite interesting tool which was called and still called Jigsaw, which allowed to split your application into modules. And what's more important, using this tool, the whole JDK was split into pieces. Why is it important? Because it allowed to decommission a big collection of APIs which was, for example, never used or, for example, became deprecated for a long time. And another good usage of Jigsaw is that it allowed to build a custom runtimes for Java, for example, using JLink. And JavaFX, actually JavaFX also was extracted from JDK many years ago, and at the moment it is developed separately as an OpenGFX project. So what is JavaFX? If you're familiar with all desktop applications, you may know that it's possible to build them using Swing. And Swing, by the way, is quite convenient tool. It is not really widely used nowadays. And the main problem is application by default application which are built using Swing are not very pretty, but at the same time you can customize it quite extensively. And for example, if you take a look into the JetBrains ID, all of them are built on top of Kotlin base, and all of them are using Swing. So JavaFX is not an extension, but let's say a parallel branch, which allows to build quite pretty applications using Java. And from this video, you may know what you can use in order to build pretty applications with JavaFX and what features were introduced into it recently. The third article in my list is about taking risks. And by the way, it is a motivation article about happiness and decision making. And to be honest, it has nothing to do with software engineering. But this article tells a quite a good story about decisions we all have to make. On the one hand, you may say that, well, in case if you need to buy, for example, a new house or move from one location to another, this is something which you can do easily, because what you need to do is just, for example, buy a ticket, take a train, and go. On the other hand, it might be quite complicated to make this decision, just because, for example, you have relatives who live nearby and they may be, for example, not really happy that you're leaving them. So if you read this article, you, let's say, may know a little more about fear which people have during decision making. And maybe next time when you see that people are, for example, feeling some social anxiety, or maybe which are not really confident in themselves, uh, you will be less judging. The last one article is a collection of dynamic programming algorithms, and it says that every programmer should know this collection of algorithms. And you know, it is not quite often you need to solve dynamic programming tasks or issues, but still at the same time, if you know it, you have better flexibility of mind. And nevertheless, it's good to be familiar with them. So obviously Fibonacci numbers is one of the most well-known tasks of dynamic programming. Nevertheless, there are many of them which are also quite useful. For example, longest common subsequence, which allows you, for example, to compare strings, and it is, let's say, definitely used in a well-known library in Java, which is string utils. Knapsack problem is, again, it's a also, on the one hand, it is not something which we do every day as developers, but still it would be nice to be familiar with it. For example, you're going to a long trip and need to pack your backpack. And actually, there are many of them. This is quite useful article. You may read it and become familiar with these algorithms. And what else I recommend you to do is to try to practice with algorithms. So, for example, what you may do, you can try to implement them on your own, or, for example, practice them on some coding platform like LeetCode. If you like my videos, don't forget to put comments, likes, and subscribe to my channel. Have a good week.